let's get started with this tense discussion between Mehdi Hasan and the Israeli advisor, Mark Regev, on the Israeli claims. Now, this is very interesting. Hold on to your seat. I thought this was pretty heated. You know, I'm not like a fan of Mehdi Hasan, but I do think it was good that he pushed back the way that he did. And I think this is going to expose some things, what they are finally admitting here in reference to what happened on October 7th. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here.
Joining me now, Mark Regev, senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He was previously Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom. Mark Regev, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Let's start with the tragic situation. Pleasure to have you on. Let's start with the tragic situation of the hostages. Hostage taking, a clear war crime by Hamas, and those hostages, of course, need to be released. Are we any closer to the release of any more hostages?
We surely hope so. You know, Hamas, as you've reported, has kidnapped some 240 people. Unfortunately, today we found the body near the Shifa hospital of one of the hostages, a woman from Kibbutz Be'eri. Her name is Yehudit Weiss. She was 65 years old, a mother of 5. And so she's no longer a hostage. She was dead. The information we have is when she was taken into captivity, when she was abducted by Hamas, she was alive. We've now found her body. It was one of the results of the military operation today. Of course, getting the hostages out remains one of the focal points of our military operation. And we believe that by expediting the military pressure on Hamas, we're actually getting closer to the release of hostages.
Let's just pause here for a second, because something that I tend to notice with these discussions about the hostages is that you never hear them talk about the hostages on the other side, the Palestinian hostages that are being held hostage by the state of Israel. You never hear them talk about that. And so it's a one-sided perspective, but I do think Mehdi Hasan is going to push back quite a bit here. So let's go ahead and get into it.
So was it a mistake in hindsight, and that's tragic news to hear about this poor woman, was it a mistake for Prime Minister Netanyahu, your boss, to have reportedly turned down a deal at the start of this conflict that would have seen Hamas free women, the elderly, kids, in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire?
Okay, this part right here, Netanyahu, this is from The Guardian, Netanyahu rejected ceasefire for hostages deal in Gaza. So this was an opportunity that Netanyahu had where he actually could have made some type of deal, you know, stop the fire, like have a ceasefire, and then those hostages would be released. Benjamin Netanyahu rejected that. And I believe he rejected that because his intent is to destroy Gaza, period. His intent is not to, let's try to make some type of negotiation. You got to understand, this guy is a psychopath. This guy is a maniac. This guy is far right wing. And for people who in the United States, they want to complain about Donald Trump, I want to remind you that Benjamin Netanyahu is to the right of Donald Trump. So just keep that in mind. This guy is insane. He does not want the Palestinian people there, period. He's talked about this before, this idea of a greater Israel, where the Palestinian people in Gaza are pushed out into Egypt, not allowed the right to return. There's several settlements in the West Bank that Israel is illegally occupying today. They are still removing Palestinian people from their homes in the West Bank today. So the greater Israel idea that Netanyahu wants to employ is to consume Gaza, is to consume the West Bank, and this extends into Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So that is why he's not willing to make any type of deal for the hostages. So if you care about the hostages as much as you say that you do, you would have agreed to that deal to get the hostages back.
Free women, the elderly, kids, in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. Isn't that why so many of the families of the hostages are angry with your government?
Sorry, Mehdi, that's just disinformation. There was not a real option for a deal before the ground operation. It was looked at seriously, but Hamas put nothing on the table that could be worked with. And so that's just not correct to say there was an option. We might have an option now for a deal. I can't tell you for sure. we might have an option, because the military pressure on Hamas is maybe making Hamas understand that if they want a temporary ceasefire, they need to release hostages. Without that, we're not going to have a temporary ceasefire. So we're hitting Hamas hard, and maybe the military pressure will force them to consider how they look at the hostages. Look, we can't expect them to release hostages because they're suddenly going to become humanitarians, right?
Let me pause here for a second. I'm sorry, I disagree with that. I don't think it has to deal with the military pressure. I think it has to do with the fact that protests have erupted all across the world. These protests have continued for weeks, since October 7th. There was a huge one on Friday in Chicago, Boston, DC, New York City. San Francisco shut down a bridge. They shut down the Boston Bridge, the one that goes to BU. They shut down the BU Bridge here in Boston. That's just in the United States, not to forget Texas, which also had a huge protest. And these have been going on for weeks. Internationally, protests have erupted in places like Jordan, and Indonesia had millions of people come out and protest. Ireland, Greece, France, countries that are allies of the United States. So I don't think it's just about the fact that they've been implementing military pressure on Hamas. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that the world is watching. And when was the world watching before? The world was watching after George Floyd. The world was watching during the Vietnam War. So we have to think about these things. The pressure from the outside, when you have people come out in mass, it actually can be effective.
They're obviously not. They're brutal, vicious terrorists. And they'll only release hostages when release hostages when they're forced to do so.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the military pressure. We are nearly 6 weeks into this bombing campaign and ground invasion. The Gaza Health Ministry says Israel has killed more than 11,000 people in Gaza, including a record number of children.
The Hamas controlled.
Let me finish my question.
Notice how he starts to interrupt Mehdi Hasan when he calls out the number of casualties of the Palestinian people. See, he doesn't want to hear that number. He's like, no. Let's not talk about anything bad that we've done.
But you can't say that. No, but you said you have to say the Hamas controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza.
I don't have to say what you asked me to say. More than 4,000 kids,
true.
They say,
that's true. You don't deny that, Mehdi. You don't deny that it's the Hamas controlled.
I'm not
and
denying.
the health ministry is controlled by Hamas.
Let me finish my question.
You can, but please tell the viewers the truth. That information is provided by Hamas.
So he doesn't really have to tell that to the viewers, because the thing is this. The viewers have seen the videos on social media, on TikTok, on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it. We've seen the videos. So I don't really need to get a head count from another source when I can see the video footage in front of me. We see the casualties are way higher for the Palestinians. And that has been the case for years. And I'm going to show you a countdown of that throughout the years to show you the number of casualties, how they've been significantly worse for Palestinians than they have for the Israelis. You cannot deny that. So he doesn't want to admit that, because then that would make the state of Israel look bad.
Okay, and that information, we'll come back to that information, but you've got dead Gazans. The American government say maybe more than 11,000. You've got a record number of journalists killed, according to the CPJ, a record number of UN workers killed, according to the UN, and yet Hamas still exists. It's still capable of firing rockets into Israel, still has the hostages. You haven't found their big base under the Shifa hospital either. Your critics say that shows this war is a failure.
I would argue that's all incorrect, Mehdi.
How is it incorrect? You have killed over 11,000 people. You have not contained Hamas. They are still active. You have not retrieved the hostages. So if I had to declare whether or not Israel's actions have been successful or unsuccessful, based on the fact that they have not recovered the hostages, based on the fact that they have not been able to contain Hamas still, and they've killed over 11,000 Palestinian people, I would say that it has been unsuccessful.
We're hitting Hamas hard and they're feeling the pain. We just discussed that a moment ago. Why they may be now considering seriously a hostage release. It's not because, as I said, they've become humanitarians. It's because they're under very, very massive military pressure. Look, this operation is not one that we wanted, obviously. This war was forced upon Israel in the terrible attack of October 7th, and we are fighting back, and we will destroy Hamas. We'll dismantle their military machine, and we'll take apart their political control of Gaza. That's good for Israel for obvious reasons. We don't have to live in fear of terrorists crossing the border and killing our people, butchering our children in the middle of the night. But it's ultimately also good, and I hope you agree with me, it'll be good for the people of Gaza who deserve better than this terrible authoritarian, extreme Hamas regime.
There wouldn't even be, let me be very clear here, Hamas wouldn't even exist had it not been for the settlements, the occupation, and the imprisonment of the Palestinian people. They wouldn't even exist. Do people understand this? Gaza does not have an army. They don't have one. So it's just, these are the times when we have to go back and we have to look at history a little bit here. We would not have Hamas if it wasn't for the occupation, the land theft, pushing out of the Palestinian people, imprisoning them in Gaza, restricting their right to move. You wouldn't have it. It wouldn't have happened. Just like we would not have had ISIS had the US government not gone in and removed Saddam Hussein. This didn't start overnight. People didn't just wake up one day and said that they're going to go attack people in Israel. That's not how this happened. So him pretending to ignore history and pretend like the state of Israel is just innocent here, it's not only flawed, it's wrong.
The people of Gaza are still alive. As I say, more than 11,000 people dead, reported dead, 4,000 children. I just want to pull up on the screen.
Hamas's numbers.
You say Hamas's numbers. I should point out, just pull up on the screen. In the last two major Gaza conflicts, 2009 and 2014, the Israeli military's death tolls matched Hamas's health ministry death toll. So, and the UN human rights groups all agree that those numbers are credible. But look, your wider point is true.
Can I challenge that? Will you allow me to challenge that, please? Can I just challenge that? I'd like to challenge that. I'll try to be as brief as you are, sir. Those numbers are provided by Hamas. There's no independent verification. And secondly, more importantly, you have no idea how many of them are Hamas terrorists, combatants, and how many are civilians. Hamas would have you believe that they're all civilians, that they're all children. And here we have to say something that isn't said enough.
First of all, the United Nations confirmed those numbers. He's ignoring that part.
Hamas, until now, we're destroying their military machine, and with that, we're eroding their control. But up until now, they've been in control of the Gaza Strip. And as a result, they control all the images coming out of Gaza. Have you seen one picture of a single dead Hamas terrorist in the fighting in Gaza? Not one. Is that by accident, or is that because Hamas can control the information.
You asked me a question and you
Gaza.
said you would be brief. I haven't, you're right, but I have seen lots of children with my own lying eyes being pulled from the rubble.
Because they're the pictures Hamas wants you to see.
Let me pause here for a second. Think about what he just said. Mehdi Hasan just said, I have seen a lot of pictures and images of children being pulled out from the rubble. The advisor here says, because those are the pictures that Hamas wants you to see. Are you not killing children? I mean, it's just like, are the pictures fake too now? This is something to think about. Think about what he just said, because that's what they want you to see. What does that have to do with the fact that you are killing children?
Exactly,
and also because they're dead.
They're the pictures Hamas wants.
But they're also people your government has killed. You accept that, right? You've killed children, or do you deny that?
No, I do not. I do not. First of all, you don't know how those people died, those children.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God. See, this right here, this part right here kills me. Now he's trying to say that he doesn't accept that they have killed children. And he's saying you don't know how they died. We've seen the video footage. We've seen the pictures. This is absolutely appalling. So let me get this straight, ladies and gentlemen. We're not allowed to question We're not allowed to question what the state of Israel was saying in reference to the casualties. We're not allowed to. Have you noticed that? We're not allowed to question it. And by the way, Mehdi Hasan is going to debunk something later on. But we're just supposed to believe what he says. We're just supposed to believe him. We're just supposed to believe what Netanyahu says. We're supposed to trust their numbers. We're supposed to trust their story and not question it. I mean, to me, it's beyond pathetic. This is terrible.
First of all, we don't want to see a single child killed.
Okay, here's my question for you, Mark. You say, I agree with you. I agree with you. We shouldn't blindly believe anything Hamas says. But why should we believe what your government says either? Your military spokesman on Monday pointed to an Arabic document in the basement of a Gaza hospital and claimed it was a Guardian list on which every terrorist writes his name. But that was false. It was just a calendar with the days of the week on it. Your colleague...
See this? So this is something that people actually... called out on Twitter, like people that were able to read Arabic. They said, yeah, that's actually a calendar with the days of the week on it. So Mehdi Hasan is calling this out.
In the Prime Minister's office, Ophir Gendelman posted behind-the-scenes footage from a Lebanese short film and claimed it was Palestinians in Gaza faking their own injuries. That tweet is still up a week later. That is endless disinformation from your government, is it not?
I disagree, and I think on the important issues, look, I'll give you an example, Mehdi. Originally, we estimated... No, I'm answering your question. Allow me to answer your question. I'm answering your question directly, if you'll allow me. We originally said in the atrocious Hamas attack on our people on October 7th, we had the number at 1,400 casualties. And now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt, we thought they were ours. In the end, apparently, they were Hamas terrorists.
Let's pause here for just a second. You came back and you had to retract your statement because of the pressure from independent journalists there on the ground. That's why. That's why you had to come back and retract your statement. We're just supposed to sit here and pretend like that wasn't a calendar on the wall. We're just supposed, he hasn't addressed that, by the way. Notice he didn't acknowledge that that's a calendar, which means that they were lying. Once again, they were lying. So you see this flip-flop with the numbers. We talked about this before. 1 minute they said it was 1,400. Now they say it's 1,200. Here he is, the advisor to Netanyahu, and he is admitting on MSNBC that they were wrong about the casualties. He is admitting that some of those people were actually Hamas. And I would question how many of them were Hamas, but he's saying that some of those casualties that were reported as Israeli casualties were not all Israeli casualties. So to that point, we are supposed to not believe the journalist, the independent journalist that is reporting on the ground in Gaza. We're supposed to dismiss everything that they're saying, but we're supposed to trust all the information that is being reported by the IDF.
When we make a mistake, we admit it.
Short on time.
Why does that give you permission? Why does that give you permission to accept Hamas's numbers? I don't understand.
I didn't ask about Hamas numbers. I said to you that your military.
No, but you were quoting to me before Hamas numbers, Mehdi. You were quoting to me Hamas's numbers.
Because the entire UN and the human rights community and the American intelligence community on Friday said they trust those numbers. But you're dodging my question, Mark.
I'm not sure that's true.
Why did your military spokesman on Monday point to a calendar in Arabic and say these are the names of terrorists on them? That's false. Can you accept that here and now?
I'm not aware of the incident.
Let's put up the image.
Oh, now all of a sudden when he's caught in a lie, when they're caught in a lie, all of a sudden now he's not aware of that information that was reported, but he's aware of everything else that has been reported. So Mehdi Hasan pulls it up.
The image. You have
I don't read Arabic. It doesn't help me. I have no comment. I'm not familiar with the incident.
Does your spokesman read Arabic?
Hang on, I have a question, Mehdi. You're a journalist. Have you made a professional mistake ever? Not intentionally, but have you made a professional mistake?
Exactly.
But the numbers, but this information right here, this particular piece of information about this calendar was not reported by a journalist. It was first reported by a member of the IDF. The video is still on Twitter. You can go look it up. So he's trying to bring up the fact, well, Mehdi, aren't you a journalist? Haven't you ever made a mistake before? It wasn't initially reported by journalists. It was initially reported by the IDF, which goes to show you again that you cannot trust what is coming from the IDF, which is what a lot of us have been saying all along.
I own up to it.
Have you made a mistake?
So can you own up to the mistake?
So if I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, but there's a difference between making an honest mistake and between Hamas that deliberately exaggerates numbers to suit its propaganda purposes. There's a huge difference. So it sounds like
how do you honestly mistake a calendar? So here's the thing. Let's say that you cannot read Arabic. All right, cool. I'll accept that. So if you can't read Arabic, then how do you know what it says on that sheet of paper? Let's say that you can. So if you can read Arabic and you proceed to tell people that this is a list, the name of terrorists on the sheet of paper, and it's actually a calendar, is that a mistake or is that an intentional lie? That was an intentional lie for the IDF to be able to excuse the fact that they were targeting hospitals and that there were babies that died in those hospitals because they were pulled off the incubators. Other children died in those hospitals. The fact that Doctors Without Borders was actually complaining about the targets as well. Doctors Without Borders, for those who are not aware, these are typically doctors in the US, but they travel to practice elsewhere. They usually go to countries that don't have, a lot of medical facilities, or they don't have as many doctors. So I've seen Doctors Without Borders before, but you can't, the people see the writing on the wall. You cannot continue to sit up here and try to fool the American people. The thing is this, if you did not know how to read Arabic, then you didn't know what that sheet of paper said. So you still lied. If you knew how to read Arabic, then you knew what that sheet of paper said, and you still lied, okay? That's not a mistake, that's a lie.
So hold on. You said propaganda. Can we just deal with your colleague Ophir Gendelman's tweet? It's still up 7 days later. Why has it not come down? It's a Lebanese short film. We can put it on screen. It's not Palestinians faking their own injuries. Can we own up to that mistake and take that down? Is that not propaganda?
He's talking about this one right here. So this was actually called out by Community Notes. So someone posted, the Palestinians are fooling the international media and public opinion. Don't fall for it. See for yourselves how they fake injuries and evacuating injured civilians all in front of the cameras. Hollywood gets busted again. So it turns out, according to Community Notes, the video is the backstage of a short film, The Reality, shot in Lebanon by Lebanese actors to support the population of Gaza. Sometimes Community Notes does good work. Sometimes they don't. But that context there is very important. So Mehdi Hasan is asking him, are you not going to admit that this was false?
Once again, I understand that was also a mistake. And
so why is it still up 7 days later?
I'll speak to Ofer about it if you like. I'll speak to Ofer about it if you like. He's a friend of mine.
Okay.
It's still posted, though.
Colleague, I quite like him. He's a good man. He's actually very effective. Why is he effective?
Well, he speaks mother tongue level Arabic.
Mark. I agree. He made a mistake, but let's be clear. It's very good that we have someone who can speak Arabic in the Arab networks directly to Arab people, so they can hear Israeli opinions directly.
Appreciate that.
Well, if that gentleman who posted that picture there also speaks Arabic, then you can also ask him about that calendar, no?
He's amazing at that. He's very important.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I know you're short on time, much more short than me, so I'm going to keep going. Let's talk about war crimes. Human rights groups, as well as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, have accused Hamas of committing war crimes. But they've also accused Israel of war crimes in Gaza, too, which you blame on Hamas. So I have a simple question for you. If Hamas gunmen were hiding out in a school in Tel Aviv or an apartment block in Haifa, would you be okay with the Israeli Air Force dropping bombs on those buildings, leveling them, killing the innocent Israelis inside in order to get the Hamas gunmen? Would you do that?
That right there, I will say, is a brilliant question by Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi isn't always on point, and I don't always agree with him. But that question right there, listen to what he says.
But you're right in your question. Of course, Hamas hides behind students and children. That's their whole policy. That's why we've had the casualties we've had. Hamas deliberately embeds itself, as you said in your question, amongst civilians. The fact that they buried themselves under the Shifa hospital in Gaza City, not one hospital, but a whole series of hospitals. They
Mark,
took
with respect,
over
you're not answering my
and they turned them
question.
If you know that they're underneath the hospital, why haven't you gone underneath the hospital? If you know that they're multiple times we've heard this, that they're in the tunnels, why haven't you gone into the tunnels? You see, they honestly make themselves look bad. Other people don't have to try to make them look bad. The government, the state of Israel, is making themselves look bad by the things that they admit during these interviews.
military installations.
Would you bomb?
I am answering your question.
Would you bomb schools and houses in Israel if Hamas militants were believed to be under them and kill Israeli human shields in the process?
We don't deliberately kill anyone. That's not a fair question. What we are trying to do is eliminate this threat.
Okay, would you accidentally kill Israeli human shields? I'm asking you a very simple question.
We wouldn't want to accidentally kill anyone. We wouldn't accidentally. No, we wouldn't accidentally want to kill anyone.
Understood.
But can I tell you, when the West fought ISIS, when the West fought ISIS in Fallujah and in Mosul, also there ISIS used human shields. They actually used a hospital, I believe, in Mosul. You probably know this as well as I do.
I do. And what
the West was fought, and the West was fought. But I think it's actually.
And it was wrong. So don't try to point to what the West did and say, oh, well, the West did it, so we can do it too. It was wrong. People spoke out about that back then. People spoke out about that. People like also Julian Assange revealed U.S. war crimes. That's why Julian Assange is in prison. People have spoken out against it. So don't point to the United States and say, well, the U.S. did this, the West did this. We're not the best example to use. We're not the best example to use.
I think America did the right thing. You had to defeat these brutal terrorists.
Would you apply the tactics of Gaza in Israel? It's a simple question.
We wouldn't allow them. We wouldn't allow them to take over a school in the first place. We'd send in special forces and we'd take out the terrorists.
I know you're over on. You're out of time.
I did answer your question. Why did you? I didn't answer it the way. I didn't answer it in the way you wanted me to answer it. That's the problem. I didn't answer it the way you wanted me to answer it. We would send in special forces and we would neutralize the terrorists. That's what we've done in the past. You know we've done it that way. Yes.
So they would send in special forces, right? So why aren't they, and this is something that other politicians have admitted as well, why aren't they isolating it? Why aren't they, if you know that they are in the tunnels, why didn't you go into the tunnels? I'm seeing them go after refugee camps, multiple hospitals, and now we'll get to this when we get to the Crystal and Sagar story, because another thing that they go into is the fact that they told the Palestinian citizens to move south, but now they're coming for the south too, which is what I told you they would do. So where are those people supposed to go? They can't go back north. They can't stay in the south. They can't go over into Egypt, and they shouldn't have to go over into Egypt. This is exactly what Netanyahu wants. He wants them pushed out, lock the borders, and don't let them come back in.
Last question for you. You've got ministers in your government. I have to ask this question. Amichai Eliyahu, who said Israel should consider dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza, which would kill over 2 million people. He's still in your government. Avi Dichter, another member of your government, went on TV and said this is Gaza Nakba 2023. And your boss, Benjamin Netanyahu, invoked Amalek, which was a biblical call for killing every man, woman and child. Mark, do you understand why that cannot be heard as anything other than calls for genocide or ethnic cleansing around the world?
So will you allow me to answer?
Of course.
Number one, that minister was reprimanded by the Prime Minister, Eliyahu, and he was told very forthrightly, he's suspended from the government, and if he makes any statements like that again, he's fired.
Doesn't matter, it's too late. He went on national television and made that statement, and the word is already out. And by the way, I don't think he would have felt comfortable making that statement unless he knew that that was exactly how his boss felt as well.
Avi Dichter, I think I actually agree with what he said. The Nakba, the tragedy that was brought upon the Palestinians in 1947-48 was because of an extreme irresponsible leadership that wasn't willing to compromise. And Hamas is doing the same thing to Palestinians in Gaza. Terrible. And if they are creating a catastrophe, it's because of Hamas. And on the third point, Amalek was known in Jewish history, and I'm sure you know this, that they attacked from behind They killed the women and the children and the people who were sick, who couldn't walk quickly. That's why Amalek is in the Bible, is so condemned, because they attacked the innocent.
Correct you.
No, I know my. Don't tell me I don't know my Jewish history. I know my Jewish history.
Go and attack the Amalekites. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, and children. Is that what you're doing in Gaza? That's what the Prime Minister invoked.
No. He was describing, first of all, no one in Israel is calling for women and children to be killed. On the contrary, how can you?
Well, your Heritage Minister did. He said nuke Gaza.
No. What we have said is we're going to wipe out Hamas, and we are going to wipe out Hamas, but we.
No, I'm sorry. I saw part of that interview. That is not what that guy said. He did not say he was going to wipe out Hamas. He said all of them. All of them.
Make a clear distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian civilians of the Gaza Strip, who are in many ways Hamas oppresses them. Hamas might want to kill Israelis, but the way Hamas treats the civilian population of Gaza, I'm sure you yourself will admit that they deserve better than that terrible Hamas terrorist regime.
I will admit that they deserve better than what the state of Israel is doing to them. How can you sit up there and call out another group for oppression when you have physically taken these people off of their land? You took their homes. You put them in an open air prison. You control the resources. You decide what foods go into Gaza. You decide who gets to leave Gaza if they have to go to the hospital to have surgery. You decide who gets that permit to be able to go. And there have been a number of people that have been refused, by the way. So how dare he sit up here and talk about another group oppressing another group, and you are the one in power. Your government is the one that's making these decisions. Your government is the one that pushed people off their land, that took their homes. Your government is the one that controls the resources, the land, the air, and the sea. You have no room to talk about anybody oppressing anyone else, because we have to think about what's real here. The gall of him to say that.
But on that note, we're out of time. Well, I'll give you one very straightforward last yes or no question for you. That Joe Biden wants a two-state solution in the Middle East. He wants it sooner rather than later, he says, to get peace in the Middle East. Does your government, does Prime Minister Netanyahu support a two-state solution? Yes or no?
I think it's a time now for war. It's a time for victory. And when that's over, with Hamas defeated, with Hamas destroyed, when you've taken out the most extreme enemy of peace, that'll create room, I think, for more moderate and pragmatic voices to fill the vacuum, and that'll be good for peace.
Okay, I call BS on that, because Netanyahu has had several years to pursue a two-state solution, and he has chosen not to. So I don't believe what he's saying in reference to that. I think this is BS. I think they don't want a two-state solution. Netanyahu has advertised the Greater Israel Plan multiple times. Look, the writing is on the wall, people. And, kudos to Mehdi Hasan for pushing back on him, because this guy is just blatantly lying. And it's gotten to the point that, again, because of all the protests, mainstream media had to push back. You have to talk about the other side now. Thank you for the super chat, Penny. IDF helicopters shot missiles at cars at festival. Yeah, I saw an article about that as well. I saw the video too, but I can't play the video on here. Thank you for the super chat, 007 Angelo. If only the USA Doctors Without Borders visit the USA. I know, I was thinking the same thing. JB says, Sabs, is this the reason why they took the Muslim hosts off the main anchor chair of MSNBC initially, because they could dismantle Israeli arguments? That is what I believe. I think that's why they had removed Mehdi Hasan and I forget the other gentleman's name. I think that's why they removed him, because they knew that they could talk about the other side, the other perspective.